Test. Oh, no, I'm not seeing anything. Maybe because... Hello, testing, I guess. Oh wait, I gotta start recording. Oh, I am recording. Yes. Hello, testing, I guess. Oh wait, I gotta start recording. I'm still getting used to this flute. I wasn't used to, for a lot of years, I had the plugs in it, and so I didn't leave the holes open on the flute. It got these holes in each key. And so I put the plugs in it again, but I'm still not disciplined enough sometimes to make sure that my fingers are in them. I can actually feel when they're in there, which is good, so it trains me to do it better, and then I'll have more flexibility. in rolling notes and stuff, even more differently, getting a little different sounds and tones. Oh boy. Guess we'll play a little harmonica now. I'm better off actually talking about prophecy. Maybe nobody cares about that. Even though it happens to be, I hate to say it. I mean, I don't hate to say it, but unfortunately, it's the position I'm in to talk as if I know what I'm talking about. And the only reason I feel like I do know what I'm talking about sometimes is when I'm talking about what I learned from T and Do. And after being with them for 19 years and then dropping out and recognizing I had to go public when they laid down their lives. Not had to, but I mean, I just felt like I had to. I felt like I had to. And it was just a matter of that, really. Because I knew 19 years worth of details of life with T and Do and their followers, and how it all started from the beginning in 1975 when I joined them out of Walport, Oregon. While I was living, playing in a band actually, which I quit to join with T and Do, and building a house, which I left half built, on a little startup commune that with two other, well, a family of 2 people and 2 children, young children, and another individual who owned the property in Walport, Oregon, where I was building the house and growing a big garden, you know, trying to kind of homestead, because I got kicked out of Canada. That's where I tried to go, from Long Island, New York. Anyway, but that's a long story, and people don't want to hear about me. If they do, actually, you can always read my story. It's called Sawyer's Story on my blog, Sawyer HG, as in Heaven's Gate, sawyerhg.wordpress.com. And look up, search for Sawyer's Story, and you know, it's a whale of a story because of how I was basically a fish that was caught in the human sea. And the bait for this fish was the truth, which I was actually, my vehicle was prepared for. Which is not for any reason that I could provide a good opportunity for a returning soul to take over the vehicle, to make this human vehicle their vehicle, take it over, wash its brain, and take it over, to continue their lessons for the older members of the next level that came in the past, that they were having lesson time with in the first trimester with Moses and the second trimester with Jesus. And now this was the third trimester when Jesus, in a new vehicle, not the same vehicle that he took into the cloud, came back. So I got to tell somebody on Facebook that I'm live streaming. I should have done that before, and I was thinking of doing it. Send this message out, right? So I don't know if you guys can get that. Sorry, I just took a second there to oh good, I got some chats, because then I know what direction to take. Okay, I guess I should put my screen over here so I can look like I'm talking to somebody. So I'll move this over to here. And then put this over here. And open it up here. Oh, what am I doing? I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. I'm going to put OBS over here, right? Oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. All right, now I'm looking at the camera while I'm talking, and now I get to see myself, you know, a few seconds behind that. So, hopefully it's coming back. Yeah, okay, it's coming back, so. This is so weird. You know what? I can't watch it, that part. I just gotta talk to the camera. I guess I can just minimize it. Oh, sorry. Then I won't see the chat. All right. I just gotta deal with this. Okay, so hello there on the chat. I'm Thomas. I'm at work, so I'm listening, but can't use the chat. I'm here though, just so you know. Okay, cool. I have a question, and then I have a question for, this is, I guess, esteemed Aurora Borealis. I have a question for you. If our bodies are just vehicles, I was wondering what happens when you die and your death doesn't coincide with the kingdom ship. Well, then you're either saved someplace in the kingdom ship has more than one bus, is the way T and Do taught. And and they also, and the kingdom ship actually has levels. The way I believe the kingdom ship is talked about in prophecy in the book of Revelations is as the New Jerusalem, which is 1,300 and something miles wide and long and breadth as well. It's a cube. And I began, when I first started to study that, the book of Revelations, when I was writing the book that I wrote, I was trying to figure out what that was, because it looks like it's a spacecraft that's hovering, right? And so this is what John is seeing in this dream that he was having. And so then when you go into it more, you find out that the two witnesses were returning to the New Jerusalem. And so the New Jerusalem also has a geographic signature on it. And T and Do always taught that the Mississippi River seemed to divide the part of the country that they were comfortable staying in and feeling close to their older member. Because T and Do talked about it, both having an older member, which would have been Do's older member's older member. So his grandfather, just like we have a potential relationship with Do as our father and T as our grandfather. Right now. All humans have that potential and have degrees of it. Many have degrees of it. And anyway, but so if you measure actually, and they always talked about how the next level came back to the Southwest United States. And I realized that the altar was actually in the Southwest United States, which was where they left from. That's where they sacrificed their physical flesh bodies. Self-sacrifice. Which is what Jesus taught needed to happen, but he taught the disciples that they needed to do that by telling the truth and knowing that they would be treated the same way he was treated, be killed. So they were self-sacrificing themselves in that way, using someone else's hands. It's a little easier, I think. Because that's how I think of what I'm doing now, as being willing to be self-sacrificed by someone else's hands. So anyway, but so the I have to get my thoughts. I can't be looking at anything else and being distracted by what's visual and really when I talk, except if something's nondescript. So I look down, but there's more to it than that. Because if you actually look at where all the meetings were held and where all the periodicals were put out, what you see is a two-stage return of the next level. So that the harvest is actually twofold, which is talked about in Revelation chapter 14. And the first fold is he comes and receives them to himself. Now he at that point is T as the he, the Father. But it's also Do because he's just in the vehicle, but he's receiving everybody too. Because he's the one that's actually got the sickle that's doing the harvesting of cutting down the stalks. The stalks are our physical bodies. And the wheat are the wheat grain is the fruit. That's how it was always illustrated. So anyway, I got off the track, but and that was all outlined. And so the second harvest is the remainder of those 144,000 souls that were planted and that are waking up. And doesn't mean that if you weren't planted, that, well, it doesn't really matter who's planted and who's not planted. So we can't take that as an ego trip. But if somebody's attracted to this information and they, even if they don't necessarily want to, they feel compelled to keep on being attracted to it, then, they have what it takes to go the distance, however long that takes. And the whole challenge then is to trust in T and Do and to start a communication with them by asking them to help you, and they will help us all. They help us all very gently. They put things in front of us that will help us answer our own questions. And that's by exploring our doubts and everything. And the things that happen to us in life, and then what we see that comes to us as a result of us continuing to seek the truth, whether that's in whatever field it is, in the human condition, all become the lesson ground to teach us. And instead of what happens to humans ordinarily, all the time, we start to see how the next level is answering our questions and fulfilling our wishes through what we feel led to participate in and not participate in. What we need to get rid of from our life to stop us from having as many distractions that will take us away from giving our all to the next level, because the object is to give our all to the next level, all the members. And the next level are tolerant of us because they know what it takes to get these vehicles under control, especially in this environment that is so toxic because it's so polluted with misinformation and disinformation and chemical pollutants that also affect the vehicle and our participation in the indulgences of this world that are all feeding our hormones and setting off our senses so that we want more and more of that. And so it does take cold turkey to actually break away from it the best we can and start to separate from the human kingdom. And that's not easy to do. And we need their help to do it. We can't do it on our own. We can't do it by going into a monastery somewhere in the Himalayas or a mountain or cave and thinking about how to overcome the world. I mean, we'll get some lessons there, but if we think that's the end result from the beginning, well, try it out. I would say to anybody that feels that that's their path, because Tiendo said that there are many paths to the top of the mountain, but there's only one path off the mountain, and the only way you can get off the mountain is the human kingdom, is by following what's given from individuals that say they came from off the mountain. They say they came from heaven. Okay, now, of course, there's all kinds of people that say they came from heaven in one way or another. And yes, a lot of them are speaking for the Luciferian space alien fallen angel souls, because the next level allows them to be here so they can give us the option to go in the other direction entirely. And so they allow them to really saturate the records with misinformation and disinformation and dilution. And they do that by mistranslations, and they do that by distractions with the interpretation of the words used, the translation and the interpretation of the words used, and the context. And the context is big, of course, because the word after and the word before can sometimes be the same word, or very related, and there's a lot of things like that in the Greek and the Hebrew, and I don't know much about the Latin, but and the use of verbs and nouns and and idioms and all that stuff becomes the basis of many interpretations. And all those interpretations can all find things in history to fulfill themselves through thinking about in that way. So people think that the whole book of Revelations is already done. And some people think that, or most of it, or some people think that the kingdom of God did return. There was a second coming, but it was the 60s movement, which they're right. It did. That was the forerunner of the real start was in the 70s, when Tiendo came. And a lot of things broke loose right at the same time there. All the facsimiles were coming to a head there too. And the facsimiles were all the individuals that were working for the Luciferian space alien fallen angel souls, who the next level didn't plant seeds in because, or I don't know if they planted, well, I don't know if they planted, well, that's a good question. There is some evidence that they might have planted seeds in those vehicles in order for those souls that were the Luciferian space aliens to come back to take those vehicles by putting their spin on what the next level was all about. Space aliens, ascended masters, gurus, teachers, spiritual leaders, politicians, government leaders, kings, queens, the whole gamut of the leadership of the the world, the human world, and that was all those souls and spirits from the past return. And that's why right now we see the same thing, and we're seeing the fall of the Roman Empire again in the United States, where the Christians said Jesus was going to come back to during Israel and the Middle East. A lot of Christians say that. A lot of Christians maybe have ideas. I think, well, yeah, no, I'm wrong. Some Christians do believe that the return was to the United States. And they're picking up on the facts that the next level was planning to come back here. I don't know for how long they were planning that, but they planned to come back to a new Jerusalem. That's why there was going to be a new Jerusalem. And Jesus said that. He said, Jerusalem, the kingdom of God is not coming back here again, because every time we send prophets to teach, you kill them, you stone them. So we're gonna combine with another fold that we have. Jesus said we had another fold that we're bringing back, and then they're gonna be combined in the new area where we're coming to. And that's why the Tiendo said that the United States was the melting pot for them to return to. Because they wanted all those genetic vehicles with their minds, and their minds carry everything that happened before then, to come back with the souls. So that's where there's a reincarnation taking place on several levels. But not exactly the way the Eastern religions are teaching, because the spirits are new with every vehicle. And the souls come back are the ones that reincarnate, like Jesus talked about, being born again, of flesh, of water, is what he said, which is flesh, because water and the seas were equivalent to the human kingdom of the earth. Whenever they said earth, they were talking about the human kingdom. The world was talking about the human kingdom and the solid planet, the more solid planet. And so, the New Jerusalem. So it said the two witnesses were coming back to the same place where our Lord was crucified. And that was also compared to Sodom and Egypt. And Egypt is the two straits, which is the two streets. Two streets are the street that's the right street, and the street that's the left street, the same streets that Daniel was picturing the two witnesses standing on both sides of. Where the first one was the two witnesses, and the second one was Do, by himself, being who he knew he was, and who T told him he was, before he knew well, I don't know if it was simultaneously with him knowing who he was, because they didn't describe it that way. I got distracted by my antics, so holding my hand up, I look at myself. Oh, I look like a preacher, don't I? Oh boy. That's a sorry thing. I got to get a drink of water. 1 second. New Jerusalem. Going to the New Jerusalem. That was the question that was asked. I know I get off the track, but I think it's important to put a lot of back history onto, because if I don't describe and describe even more what T and Do taught, but this is the time period now where the total revealing was predicted to happen, was forecast to happen, was in Revelation chapter 10. And this wasn't supposed to be done until after the seven thunders sounded. And T and Do were the seven thunders. T was the first thunder. T and Do together, I'm sorry, were the first thunder as the two witnesses. And the second through seventh thunder was Do by himself, which was strictly his voice. He wasn't on videos. Well, he was on videos, but he didn't do any public meetings. Because he did all the prophecy period and teaching period was done with T, and then after T left until they all left. That was the teaching period. And so in the 90s, that teaching period started the second phase of that teaching period by reaping the start of the second harvest, by putting out the seventh thunder, which ended in the seventh thunder, which was the Heaven's Gate, which was their departure. And we were actually, it was the first phase of the departure, to put it the way Giannone described it best in the beginning of the Heaven's Gate book. So I'm glad Juno, whoever is helping me up there in the crew, because I want their help to put this across as accurately as I can and as close to the way you would have me do it as possible. And I only say that for the sake of anybody that's listening, because that's how we talk to the next level. We don't tell the next level what to do, or how we want to do things. We tell them when we have a problem, we state the problem. I have a problem. Can you help me with the problem? And then they'll help us by giving us ideas. And you can ask if you think if you're not sure if it's an idea from them, you can say, "Was this from you?" And you might get a sense, and I think you will get a sense. But if you don't get a sense, then you take a step in that direction. And you don't take any steps that you can't reverse until you're certain about the steps that you're taking as being from them. And the way you check yourself is that you study everything they taught and they did with their students, and the behaviors and ways, and then you can start to see that, like, you wouldn't step off of a cliff physically and say, save me, because that's not in the teachings from Jesus or from Tiendo, to take that kind of a risk of testing yourself, that would be called, or not, or testing the next level, right? Okay, are you going to save me? That's what Jesus said. You're going to try to tempt me, right? By listening to you. Anyway, so I forgot how I got into that, but let me get back to the New Jerusalem, if I may. Or maybe let me look at, maybe there's, okay. All right, I'll go to the next question. What happens if you cannot separate yourself from human emotions? I am too attached to the idea of leaving behind loved ones and pets. Yes, I understand that. And I couldn't have learned that better until I had a child. My vehicle produced a child with my partner, a woman. And I remember going through that big time when, right after 9/11, when kind of, I was living in Syosset, no, I was living in Stony Brook, New York, in a house on the water, on the Gulf. And I was working as a computer programmer in a job in Syosset, New York. And so I was about 30 miles from the World Trade Center. And anyway, but after that is when my journey started again. I mean, it really started again in 1997 when I went before the press and everybody, because I was really, concerned that my newborn, that I might be mobbed by journalists. And I had a partner and a child, and a little business startup, And so, you know, regular human life, and I didn't want to think. I didn't think of myself as rejoining at that point, but I felt like I had to tell the truth, and so I went public, you know, to a payphone. I called Time Magazine, Newsweek magazine, and I gave my story, and they met me at a restaurant and interviewed me, and then I felt comfortable about them coming to my house and filming. And then I had the BBC over there, and then I went to New York several times, went on 60 Minutes, on Larry King Live. And so I went through all that, but then when I went back to my life, you know, for a while I was still associated with the whole story a lot, because there was a book deal pending, and with 2 publishers in Manhattan, big publishers, and but that wasn't meant to happen at that point, and that's the way I see it. It happened. It started to happen 7 years later, actually. Interesting. I think it was about 7 when I started to write the book, because it took me a while to begin to really write the book when I moved up to where I am now in Vermont. And off the track, right? I feel like I answered that second question actually by talking about how the first step is to ask T&O to help you grow towards the next level faster, because you might be growing towards the well, I wouldn't say might. You wouldn't even be into this point of thinking about, you know, how to emotionally disconnect from pets and loved ones, unless you felt the draw from to T&O. So the next step is to just ask them for help to make that transition, and they will lead you very gently, like the way they led me very gently. At first, I wasn't led gently because I was caught by surprise in a sense, and I didn't really, you know, and it all made sense to me, because there was a soul right next to this vehicle that was feeding me the truth, and had been feeding me the truth for some time, for even years potentially, if there were some of the souls that came back in the spacecrafts, because there were souls and spirits that came back in the spacecraft. Or maybe not. Maybe it's not souls and spirits. Maybe souls that were in bodies and souls that were not in bodies, because that's the way T&O described it in the briefing that they had before they came through the crashing of spacecrafts, of some of the primitive spacecrafts that they crashed on purpose, which were probably Roswell and Aztec. And I don't know if any of the other ones were legitimate crashes or not. Well, I think there were a couple that were probably T, maybe by herself, and Do, maybe by himself. I don't know if you add the numbers, 18 plus 4 is 22, and then T&O would be 24. But I think there were 30 total with T&O counted. Anyway, I'm getting off the track, because that's all like, it's not from T&O's mind. Well, it might be from T&O's mind, but I can't back it up with what T&O said or what is in prophecy exactly yet. So I'll put that on hold to go as far as I went with all that description of the return. So, I mean, there potentially is 144,000 souls that were outside their vehicles in that spacecraft that T&O said they were giving a briefing to those souls about returning. Because Do had said before that, not before, well, after that was revealed was when T was still with us, which I'm calling the briefing, which I believe is described in Revelation chapter 4. And even talks about them throwing down their crowns. Anyway, so my head is just so full of all this. I'm sorry if I'm not getting to the gist of the question. It's let them help you. That's the answer to the question. You can trust the next level, and if you're uncomfortable with using those names, because every time you use those names, the spirits come and get you, and and tell you that that's stupid. What are those, the notes on the scale? They're from a fairyland. They're imaginary and all that bombardment, because we're all going to get stuff like that to degrees, and then you can, like T and Do said, repeated at the last instance, then reach out to the highest source you can reach, as far into the heavens as you can imagine, existing where the older members are, where the next level is, where the highest member is, where the Chief of Chiefs is. If you want to envision the Chief of Chiefs in a vehicle like was described in by T and Do as being that humanoid shape with no hair and looking like a space alien, but without the real big head and the real big bulging eyes and the insect-looking look. Members of the next level don't look like insects. They're very sophisticated looking. I mean, not sophisticated isn't the best word to use. I know Do used a word that I'm not pulling in right now. Anyway, it doesn't matter right now for that. But so let me go to the next question if there is one. Good morning. So yes, it is morning. For me, it's actually nighttime, because I'm up till like 4 or 5 and 6 a.m. every night. It just works better for me. So it's good morning anyway, because it's the morning for the rest of the world, and the sun isn't up, so it is morning. Morning from Spain. Hey there, so oh, cool. It's nice to hear from somebody from outside the United States, because Europe is and Australia and the whole world is actually included in the second harvest stage. So there's no limitations on anybody at this point. And it's all in degrees that we maybe I should go back to playing music. No, I don't know. I'll keep on. This is far more important. I just play the music in order to, if there's nobody listening, if I don't see anybody watching on the live stream, then I play music, because I don't want to be talking to nobody. But that New Jerusalem subject, that I guess if individuals want to hear more about that, or I talked about that, how it relates to prophecy and things that T and Do said, I'm going to add something to it, but I don't want to go through everything all over again. But I began to think, when I first was looking at New Jerusalem as being a spacecraft that was attached to the Earth, or just hovering right directly above it, I don't know how far above it, but to where its energy was actually creating an environment, but could actually be literally on the planet, physically on the Earth. Because T and Do talked about how next level space, they didn't relate it to New Jerusalem because they didn't talk about Scripture hardly at all. And the Revelations even less than what they talked about Jesus and Moses. and Enoch and Adam and Elijah. And they just made mention of their names, except for Enoch, who was implicated as being, well, T said that Doe was Adam, Enoch, Moses, Elijah, Jesus, and now he was returning for this, and then he would return also for the seventh closeness when everything's done. But the sixth closeness was with his older member T, his father, his heavenly father, Jehovah, God, Elohim. But they're both gods, because every member of the next level is a god in comparison to a human, because they're a kingdom level evolutionarily above humans in every way, mentally, spiritually, physically. And they grow their own bodies on a vine, Doe taught. And it took them a long time to come to understand that. And I know they were asking for a long time. And I think Doe came to understand that better after T left her vehicle. But I'm not sure about that. I think I put myself in a knot there just now. So whatever I said, I'm not sure about. That's a good thing to not be sure about. But I guess I was drifting off again to. But they said that a next level spacecraft could be actually hovering over the house that we're in. You know, we called our houses crafts, spacecrafts. But we didn't decorate them to look like spacecrafts. They were decorated like any, I guess, upper-class family would decorate a house. Because we were in big houses, but sometimes not necessarily upper class. It could be upper or middle class families, you know, because sometimes we were in Aurora, Colorado, which we actually had two houses sometimes in the suburban areas of big cities like Denver and Dallas and San Antonio and Austin and many others. But mostly those, though. And so yeah, but see, inside the house or the craft, it was run like a hospital in some ways, without. Well, I guess if you look at the patients as people that were sick and or were being healed by the next level, the doctors, which is a good analogy actually, because they talked about how the lessons were actually medicine. And that's interesting that the word medicine is what looks like the word vial has to do with in Revelations chapter 16, talking about the seven angels releasing the seven vials upon the earth, which is the last-ditch effort to throw some plagues at the population so that they can wake up to the truth that the two witnesses were T and Doe who came to deliver, and they were the two witnesses because they had control over the plagues, as it says in Revelation chapter 11. But it didn't mean that they were going to put those plagues into effect at the moment they were there, because T and Doe said that they weren't going to do that because they wanted to give time for the next level to take the student body through their overcoming enough to where they would be viable births into next level membership. It's a mind birth. It's a soul birth. Let's look at what did you have any foreigners in the class? Well, before I say that, I just wanted to say one more thing, is that well, when they were telling us about having a craft in the with the next level spacecraft that we couldn't see on top of us, they said that members of the next level could be circulating among us that were physical members of the next level that we could not see, and that they would stay out of our way so that we couldn't touch them. And I began to think about that in terms of what Jesus described as the soul birth was, the spirit birth, or spirit or soul birth, was compared to the wind. And the wind is actually something that's physical and has substance. And Jesus said that you can feel the wind, but you don't know where it's coming from and where it's going to. I mean, you know the general direction, but you really don't know. You can't see where it's coming from and where it's coming, and where it started. You can't see that, certainly, unless the weatherman tells you, and then you get an idea of it. Or if a car drives by and you feel the wind, then of course you can feel it. But what you're feeling is something that's of substance. Of course, it's all the particles that are in the air, and those particles are all. They're not just elements of the Earth, they're also frequencies. That's why there's static electricity, because the whole atmosphere is charged. It's filled with charged particles. That's why we can communicate. That's why the sound waves work. And that's the way I understand it anyway. But all components of light. So let me go to that question then. Did you have any foreigners in the class? Did any Canadians join? Yes, we had 2 Canadians that I know about join initially in 1975, and both of them stayed in the group till one left in approximately they joined in 1975, and then they left in Frank left. He was called Andoti. He left in 1992, I think. Or it could have been the start of 93 that he left, I think. And he joined with his partner, Chekody, C-H-K-O-D-Y, which came from the name that she chose, Czech, which has a meaning, because next level members were Czech partners with one another. Students, so instead of brothers or sisters or comrades, it was Czech partners, because we were to help each other stay on track with following the teachings of Tian-Do. And so she chose that name, and she was a female vehicle, and he was obviously a male vehicle, because I'm saying he, but so she was among the 38 that laid down their lives in 1997. That's what I wanted to finish that with. Okay, so other than that, there was an individual from, I don't know if he was from Germany or Japan, or we had 2 Japanese students for a while at first. One's name was Sky, I believe. Or maybe I'm getting that mixed up with them joining for a brief time in 1994. I thought it was 1975 when they joined. Oh no, it was another individual who had a vehicle that was an Oriental vehicle, joined in 1975. He didn't stay very long. I don't know if he made it to Wyoming, where the first sorting kind of happened, where Tian-Do sent 19 members out of the group. They arranged for them to go to a different campground. We were living out of doors at the time, and then the greater large number of individuals, which amounted to about somewhere numbers in the 70s or 80s, at the most 80, I think, probably more like 79. Anyway, I shouldn't put those details in there and distract myself, but they were told that they made the first cut, which was, I was among them, so I made the first cut. Anyway, as far as other vehicles, I told you about Sky, who joined, and his partner, who were both Oriental vehicles. But I think they were Americans. You know, they were raised, I think, in the United States. I'm not sure though, because we really didn't ask each other what our past was, and I didn't have any. I didn't have much time with Sky and her partner. I say we really didn't. We didn't ask one another. I mean, if we did, then the partner was responsible to say we don't talk about the past. The procedure is not to talk about the past. So that's how partners help each other start fresh, start new. So let me go to the next question. Use that link, Thomas. Oh, I'm sorry. That was just for somebody else. I must go to grocery shopping. I am hungry. Oh, okay, cool. Adios, Mark M. Well, I guess I'll just keep on talking about things that are on my mind regarding Tiando. I can go back to the New Jerusalem, or I can talk about something more recent, because I don't care. If there's anybody that's got a question that's still watching, please log on to the chat and ask it so I know what direction to take, because otherwise I'll go back to the New Jerusalem, I guess. Because when I first started to examine that, and I recognized that the size of the New Jerusalem was approximately 1,360 miles square, cube, and that was the approximate distance from like the Gulf of Mexico or the Mississippi River, the mouth of the Mississippi River, to San Diego, you know, or the Pacific Ocean. And I was reminded that the right footstool was going to be on the water, on the sea. So it was, 'cause that's where it started, North Hollywood. And Los Angeles is actually the equivalent of the city of God's angels, is the equivalent of Jerusalem. Was in the Middle East. So that's the New Jerusalem. But the area south of that is part of that. You know, the actual vicinity, from the Next Level's point of view, is well, the altar is a little bit right. Okay, the altar is right next to the temple. The biggest temple, I mean, the temple is all our vehicles are the temple. If we are wanting our vehicles to be a temple, and the degree that we are a temple is the degree in which we take on the behaviors and ways of the older members of the Next Level. And that's a process. And we can go at that as fast as we want to. The Next Level doesn't hold anybody back. My stream seems to be interrupting. or pausing. Maybe it's just the video portion. If I can be heard and anybody's on the chat, if you want to let me know if you can still hear me, I'll continue. Otherwise, I might not. Because I don't want a, because I'm recording this as well, and I don't want a recording that just has me. Well, I guess I can. Yeah, I can always post it if I find out that it didn't go to the end. So I'll finish my thought. So, well, so the altar, which, you know, it talks about in the book of Revelations that there's an altar and there's a, well, actually they say there's the court and there's the altar and there's the temple. So the temple is always where the next level is putting their primary focus. So the whole western United States, the southwest United States was the temple, and but that's where I got to the 1,360 miles square, because if you draw a line 1,360 miles north of say the United States border, you get pretty close to Edmonton, I think, if I remember correctly. Well, I mean, you get into a square that encompasses Edmonton. Because it might be tilted, you know, a little bit, you know, I don't know. Well, I guess you could have a square that's a parallelogram, right? No, does that make... No, that makes some of them longer. Right, right. Sorry, I was just spacing out on my... I'm always looking for parallels, and I get off the track. So maybe I'll end it at this point. Oh, I got 5 watching still. Okay, so I guess if there's somebody still watching, I guess it hasn't disconnected. All right. Though I don't know if that's updating. It says it's live. It's just a video, maybe that's not updating. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth with this, but distracted. So I'll keep on going with the New Jerusalem. So when I saw that distance, another thing that crossed while I was looking at the time in 2015 while I was writing the book is that the Revelations, let's see, Revelations, I'm going to go right to it. Chapter 6, I just realized something. Oh, something I haven't been talking about and thinking about. Okay. Okay, Revelation 6, 7, and 8. And when he had opened the 4th seal, you know, I could actually put this on the screen. Since I'm doing this, I might as well. I think I can do that. Yeah, there you go. We'll see if it eventually updates. It'll be in the video anyway. So, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard a voice of the 4th beast say, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth, to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. Okay, so when I'm not going to go through this whole thing because it would take me hours, because I could go through every word almost, and broaden it more, and show how it potentially connects with history. And I'll say this much, that that the Revelation 6:6 was talking about, I didn't start right in the right place for that. Darn it. I should have started over here. Revelation 6:5, and when he had opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd beast say, come and see, and beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hands. Well, when Obama first got elected, was running for office, I had voted for against Bush. I had voted for Nader, Ralph Nader, and then I, maybe even both times that he ran. I don't remember. Maybe I didn't even vote the first time, because I wasn't political at all before 2001, 9/11. But anyway, I remember I asked Tiendo who to vote for, and Doe said well, not Doe said it. Doe didn't say anything. I don't get communications like that of Doe telling me something. But in a dream, he's told me things that I had recently, and I talked about that. I think I talked about it in the Sawyer story on my blog, SawyerHG at .wordpress.com. Not at, there's no at in there. And but I had a dream with Destody in it, actually, and Destody was the only black vehicle, no, only black male vehicle among the 38, and he was someone that I was partnered with a lot, and well, not a lot, several times for, for months at a time, each time. And we weren't with partners all that long, necessarily, so we were with a lot of people. But a lot of people we were repeat partners with, like sorority for me. Anyway, but what he did, when he came to me in a dream and indicated Obama, that's all he said, was Obama. When I was asking about who to vote for. And I thought, anyway, later on, when I was still working on my book, I was studying these very scriptures here, Revelation 6:5 and 6, that talks about this. And I thought, wow, black horse of the apocalypse. So you know, because I knew who T and Do were, as Do being the white one sitting on the white horse, and this was after Do left, it made sense to me that Obama was the black horse. And so and then when the financial collapse happened, during that time, at the same time that was happening, that started even before that election. He was elected in 2008, but he was elected in 2007, right? But he took office in 2008, wasn't it? Anyway, and it was because of what? Because of the investment bankers having false derivatives or something, you know, making money off of bundling house mortgages. And it says a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny, talking about commodities and money. That was going to be happening at the time. You know, that Wall Street is all about commodities and money. And commodities happen to be real estate commodities, you know, stocks and options and all that. So that's what put me on the timetable of knowing that. And then he left office, and then what did we have at that time? We had those 2 tsunamis in Sumatra and Japan that were huge. Well, they hadn't had anything recorded like that. I mean, maybe there were tsunamis in the past where there was more deaths than that, I think. But there are tens of thousands that died during those tsunamis. So those were huge events. And they were stimulated by earthquakes. And Jesus said that was going to happen. But it wouldn't be the time yet when those happened. And of course, we've had a lot of earthquakes until then, but never that big and that, you know, creating of tsunamis. So that was definitely a huge sign. You know, when Christians talk about observing the signs, they say earthquakes are the signs and tsunamis are the signs, but they don't know how to relate it to this because they weren't prepared for that. And I was prepared for that by being with T and Do, so I could see these things because I could see the timeline. And a lot of things in the interpretation of the book of Revelations that I was able to see because of the things T and Do said and did. In fact, all the things that I was able to see because of that. There's nothing in there that I would have been able to see without their help. And it doesn't mean that everything I've seen and everything I'm talking about is 100% accurate. I can't guarantee that. So you can't take it to the bank with the next level. But what you can take to the bank with the next level is everything T and Do said and did and left behind, and the students that graduated with them said in the Heaven's Gate book. That can all be taken as gospel. That's the gospel of T and Do. T and Do and crew, I would say that's the gospel. The 24 elders and the 4 living beings, which I think are separate from the 24 elders, but are elders, I think. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. Now this part where it says, and I looked, and behold, a pale horse, I'm going to get to the Pluto part in a little bit. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him, and power was given unto them. Okay, well, them and him can be the same word, I think. I should look at that. Yeah, can be. Doesn't have to be plural. But it makes sense that it would be them, talking about them, but whether it's a persona or not, well, yeah, I guess it could be a persona, because it could be they're talking about whoever personifies the Antichrist here. You know, however many people that is. Hell, it can be 1,000 people, 1,000 souls. You know, it could be 10 souls, it could be 24 souls, 28 souls, I don't know. Anyway, but they're souls that have already expired. So, in other words, Revelation 12 taught that they were cast down for the final time by the Father and Jesus, who was the return of Michael, the archangel. That's who's talked about in this actually Revelation chapter 10 talks about how a great angel comes down. That's the great angel is the archangel. The great angel is a captain of angels. Doe is a captain. Like Mark Twain talked about being a captain of the ship, because Texas is the name of the captain's deck on a Mississippi riverboat that Samuel Clemens was a captain of, and Texas was like the riverboat, and T and Doe were the captains. But T and Doe is actually Doe called an admiral. He didn't talk about this. The only thing they talked about related to Mark Twain that I'm aware of wasn't talked about, but was illustrated with the $5.75, which was what Mark Twain said was the character Mark Twain said in the movie that Samuel Clemens made that was called Captain Stormfield's Trip to Heaven, which depicted Captain Stormfield, which Stormfield was the name of where he lived in Connecticut. Oh, wow. Connecticut as a suburb of New York City. The New Babylon. Just like, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way before. But anyway, potential. Because there is a Babylon actually on Long Island. In fact, my vehicle's brother lived there for many years, and when I came back from being with the group, I went to his house a lot of times for little parties with his friends. Anyway, so I was talking about something there, but let's see. Get to where I got distracted again. Well, the reason I was getting back to Pluto is that Pluto actually, if you look at the meaning of Pluto, the word that was translated to Pluto in the Greek, the word is Hades, okay? And Hades, the name Hades or Pluto is the god of the lower regions. Okay, so what does that mean, god of lower regions? I mean, it's only recently that I actually really thought I understood that now better than I did before. But does that mean that that's an individual in those lower regions? And yes, it does mean that, but it also means the god over those lower regions, over the god that's over the god. No, it's the god that's over the god, the false god, that's over the lower regions. Because that false god is part of those lower regions. So Lucifer is the dragon that's associated with the 7 horns and the 10 kings, which is I believe the G7 and the G10, which is the financial ministers and the nations, the 7 biggest nations, that are basically the leaders of the 7 continents. Even though Antarctica is actually jointly owned by all of them, I think. So I guess then we could think of Antarctica as hell, wouldn't it? That would make sense, right? And then inside of Antarctica, which might have been actually maybe a hollow earth of the continuance of the North Pole that Admiral Byrd went into, and Antarctica was where Admiral Byrd went back to fight against what he thought was going to be where Hitler went with the submarines, which was prepared for him by expeditions that the Hitler general, I forgot his name, said that he had prepared for the Fuhrer as a place to run away to if things went sour. I shouldn't laugh, because that was not something to laugh at, really. I mean, what I'm laughing at is the irony of how all that's connected. So then hell becomes a place, and hell was always talked about as under the earth and under the sea in other places in Revelations and in the Old Testament. And so, it all makes sense that that there are souls in that environment, and potentially those souls can have vehicles if they've learned to grow those vehicles using laboratories. Who knows if a previous civilization grew to the point to where they could manufacture humans with blood banks and sperm banks and womb banks, or human egg banks, to growing vehicles that they could then occupy when their vehicles expired. Because Tiendo said that the vehicles they had, the Luciferian space alien fallen angels, were vehicles that could live longer than a human vehicle now can live. And that makes us go back to thinking in terms of how Adam was talked about as living 900 years. And they knew what a year was at that point. They knew it was a cycle around the sun, because they had the seasons. Even though there is a lot of symbology there too. But with the next level, it all works. It all works. Whether you take it as symbolic and what you relate it to on the earth and the cycles and everything, it all works together. That's why Christians galore and Jews galore and Islamic Muslims galore and Hindus galore and Buddhists galore can be right. And I don't mean to leave out anybody, okay? But, I don't know much about the Tao, and the Tao, from what I've seen, I'm not saying, the I Ching, and I don't know much about that. So I'm going with those strains. Those might have been the residual mythology that came out of China, basically. Because it all morphed down to mythology in the past, of course. And that's the past of the Luciferian space aliens that came from a previous civilization, or several civilizations ago on Earth. Tiendo only talked about knowing that there was one, but they suspected that there were a number. And when they suspected something, you could be pretty sure that it probably happened. Because they didn't say that lightly. Just like they didn't talk about being the souls that came in through some of the crashed UFO crashes lightly. They didn't take that lightly. They didn't talk about that really till after T left, that I remember, when we were in Boulder, Colorado. in 1987. That's when we got the book Crash at Aztec. And it talked about 18 bodies. And that Doe required us to read the appendix part where it said, gave the autopsy reports and showed that they didn't have human organs. And that's some of the evidence, you know, that they didn't have human organs. You know, how can you make that stuff up? And they talked about what those organs they had were. And they said that some did have human organs and some had atrophied human organs. I think they were talking about that at least one had an atrophied penis, I guess. I don't remember that exactly. Or maybe they said a small, I don't know. Anyway. Wow, I just thought of some stuff, but I shouldn't talk about that now. Because it's just about me personally. I guess I might as well say it. I've been really above board, trying to be above board with everything about my own life. I mean, there was a time where Doe, since there's 6 people watching, there's a time where Doe had us all have a time personally with him to where we could express anything we wanted to that maybe we felt guilty about in our past, in our human life, or, you know, or whatever we wanted, anything we wanted to get off our chest. And I when I was sitting with Doe, I was hemming and hawing, kind of, oh, I don't know if I want to tell you this because it's so silly, and I went on and on like that, and he was so patient with me, probably for 5 minutes going through that, and maybe it was less, I don't know. But finally I said, I came out with it. And he didn't pressure me. He didn't say, come on, Sawyer, you know, Sawyerty, come and say it. You know, what's on your mind? He didn't say everything. He was like, just totally, when you're ready to tell me, tell me. And so finally I told him that when I was in high school, actually when I got out of high school and I went to college, away from college for a year, I came back from college, and I started hooking. I tried to hook up with a girlfriend that I had in high school, and I never got to any place with this girl. We just made out. You know, that's the only thing we did sexually. You know, rub up against each other. Me mostly up against her, and then when I went back to, you know, kind of, I still hadn't had sexual intercourse with anybody. So, even though I kind of wanted to, but I was kind of shy. And I was, I guess, mostly shy because I knew compared to other guys I had a small penis. So and I was easily excitable. I was embarrassed about that too in 5th grade when we were in the locker room, you know, for sports. And we were expected to just stand there, you know, naked in front of all these other guys, who I were never attracted to, by the way, because maybe I would have enjoyed it if I was standing there with other guys. But I would get you know, an erection, and sometimes, or it would start to go in that direction, and I would kind of, you know, go back towards my my towel. And anyway, but so I told him that I was with this girl once, and we were like making out and stuff, and I maybe even got a little further in touching her, and she reached down into my pants, and said, "Where is it?" and started laughing. I'm not embarrassed about that now at all. But that ended that session with her, and I never had anything with her after that. And it didn't stop me from ending up having a relationship after that that lasted for 5 years. But I didn't have any other relationships until I left the group. So I guess I was, even though I kind of wanted to in some ways, I was tempted. But so I told it to him, and he said, what he said to me was, that's because of who you are. And I realized I didn't know what that meant until just now, actually. Well, I shouldn't say meant, could have meant, because I don't know what that meant this. Because Doe didn't tell me it meant that, so I can't know it. But since Doe said that some of the individuals on the spacecrafts that crashed had vehicles and some didn't, see, it doesn't mean what I was thinking. So I was looking at it through what would be like a spiritual ego point of view. So I was going to say that that maybe this means that since some of the vehicles on the spacecraft in Roswell or Aztec that crashed showed evidence of an atrophied male organs, if I understand it correctly, and maybe I don't. So I don't know how you would see an atrophied female organ. And how would you see atrophied any other organs? Unless you can, well, I guess you could, the ears aren't, I mean, you could, maybe they had tiny ears. I guess that could be an atrophied, you know, and that might have been the case. But I thought it was related to the reproduction system that they were talking about. I might have to go back and research that. But maybe I'm wrong about it. So I don't mind being wrong about the whole thing in time, these connections that I'm making. But these connections probably do exist, but maybe just not to me. Because maybe other members of the group, other vehicles that were taken by returning members of the group, also were on that spacecraft with physical vehicles that died in those crashes, and were and at the point that they crashed, they had atrophied reproductive systems, because the next level either grew a vehicle with that type of vehicle, or took a vehicle from the Earth or took a soul from the Earth who had a vehicle at that stage of overcoming. The disciples who were numbered, you know, close to 100 disciples. Well, I'd say there were about 100 that we can actually, counting women, that were as much disciples as the 12 ones that were assigned the task to go public. Because they probably didn't need that experience then. So they weren't assigned that task. And they probably stayed around and related with Jesus, with the 12 disciples. The 12 that, on the first sending out, there was 2 stages to that too. There were 70 sent out after the 12 were located, were caught like fish. So anyway, so So I could have also been, like Tiendo said, that there were individuals on that spacecraft during the briefing before they came incarnate, before they came in those crashes, that didn't have physical vehicles, but there were some that did have physical vehicles around them. And then around the outskirts of them, which would be the courtyard, where that would be the temple, courtyard, those comparisons, were all the souls that were in various degrees of the overcoming process. And so those would be the ones that would be the 144,000, I believe, of souls. And those individuals were in various stages of growth, and so some of them, their vehicles may also have atrophied systems, you know, male and female. Maybe that's why there's so many women that have small breasts. I don't know that. I can't make that connection. But a member of the next level doesn't have big breasts. So it would make sense that the human vehicles that are being groomed for membership in the next level, and there's always exceptions, might have vehicles that have smaller breasts. But there's always exceptions to this. So if somebody's listening to this and has a vehicle that has big breasts, just ignore me and say, Sawyer, you know, well, if you want to, you could be an exception. It doesn't matter. If this information makes sense to you, that's what counts. And all that might reflect is that that's an area that you don't have to overcome. Maybe that's why you have a vehicle that's not attractive to other vehicles, many other vehicles, because maybe you don't have to overcome that. Oh, that's why maybe you come into a vehicle that is attracted to the same sex, because you don't have to overcome gender consciousness. Now, Tiendo did teach that individuals that are attracted to the same sex might not have to overcome gender consciousness, and gender consciousness does need to be overcome. When we judge people based on their gender, we're participating in gender consciousness. Judging the value of that person. You know, what they say, whether it's intelligent or not, or whether it's true or not, or whether it's good or not, or whether it's makes sense to the scripture or not. Because the scriptures, even that Jesus was teaching, are updated with Tiendo. That's why women were helped by the next level to seek equality in the mid-1800s, maybe even before that. Well, I'm sure before that, but the first we really knew about it in the United States in a group was with, what were they called? I forgot now. The women that were for equal rights movement. So I forgot what they were called. Anyway. So, and the same thing for guys. If you got, if you got a large, it just means that you may have more testosterone and more to overcome in that department. But it doesn't mean you can't overcome it. But I'm sharing kind of my path and my connections that I've made with the history and the documentation in the Book of Revelations. Tiendo didn't say that we could count on everything in the Book of Revelations being true. They did say that about the red letters in the Gospels related to Jesus. They said the next level worked very hard to make sure that that was accurate. And that doesn't speak to the interpretations and the ways that people are interpreting all that. But if you actually look at what Jesus said that was literal, and that what was that he meant as a story. He said when he came back, he said he wasn't going to be talking in story form anymore. Well, that means that he's going to be talking. And that's what prophecy means. You're speaking. Speaking the inspired words of God. And that's why you have a false prophet. Because then you're speaking falsehoods about the truth about the kingdom of God. And that's why, for those that are speaking falsehoods about the truth of the kingdom of God, are actually choosing to, if they're in the vehicle and they die doing that, it's okay to believe that God doesn't exist. That's that's a potential. Because you're getting removed from the religiosity of it. Tiendo said that atheism is a good pathway. But you have to actually grow to be able to see both terminology as being one, related to one truth. Science is equal. There's much scientific information in what Jesus is teaching, biological information, and what Moses was teaching, and as there is in what Jesus was teaching, I believe. I could probably bring some examples to that, but I can't think of any off the top of my head because I went too far down that pathway. But I better get back to, I want to talk about Pluto and hell before I close this down because I'm getting kind of tired. But right, and I'm talking about this verse here, which is a lot to say about. And I'm not going to say it all now, but I've talked about it in my in some of my YouTube videos, for anybody that wants to examine them to see. But I think I see more now than I did before, some of which I talked about in my book a little, but I always was having a hard time with. But I'm not going to try to go into that now because I want to stay on Pluto, because hell is the word Hades, which relates to the god of the lower regions, which is Pluto. Now, Tiendo started a movie in 1980s, the early 80s. And in the movie they said was fiction based on the truth, is the way I heard them say it. And fiction based on the truth. And in the movie that they assigned to 3 individuals to be the project leaders on, or the only ones that were working on that project. One of which was Al Odie, who was the individual with the Dr. Seuss hat on, who did all the illustrations for the movie that I posted on my Facebook Sawyer Heaven's Gate page. They wrote a script that described Pluto as a hollow planet, that inside of which was an Earth laboratory, the earthlab, and that consisted of a huge, like, replica of the Earth that didn't have any weather associated with it, but had screens, video screens, on a number of levels around it, all around it, that depicted things that were happening on Earth. And then there were individuals with clipboards standing there. You couldn't really make out what the individuals looked like. They just, because it was so small, because this Earth was huge, and they were like, an eighth of an inch or 16th of an inch tall in comparison, which you'll see in the earthlab or in my Facebook page. And so the idea was that they were, this was where all the next level communication happened between the next level headquarters and Earth. And T&O always said they were from headquarters, but they didn't say Pluto was headquarters. They said that this was fiction based on the truth. So it's up to anybody that wants to make that connection. But the size of Pluto was approximately that size, I believe. If you, that it could basically fit a 1,360 mile square inside of it, I think. I may be wrong. I may be wrong. And maybe actually Ceres is that size. And just because, but if we're thinking of Pluto as just the circular globe, that's not accurate. Because around Pluto can potentially be the atmosphere, which Pluto does have an atmosphere. That's all part of Pluto. And so that atmosphere might be the database where next level stores certain souls and spirits. That could be huge. Could be a huge database, just like the cloud is a huge database. The next level database can be, think about how much information fits on a chip, and think about how much information fits on a cell in the human genome. How many thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of particles and frequencies go into that structure. So now, now we're talking about hell on earth, because heaven is also on earth. And well, no, don't quote me on saying that, because heaven isn't on earth unless there's a member of the kingdom of heaven on earth. And then only that portion of heaven is on earth. But if the temple is right over that spot, then heaven is on earth, because the temple is heaven. Because there can be potentially members of the next level working in there. And T&O talked about how that just sending rockets into the atmosphere, into space, can be actually busting holes in places that weren't designed to have holes bust through. And that the next level has gateways in the heaven. So in the atmosphere of the Earth, and the near space of the Earth, which is kind of what the space aliens are restricted to, which could extend out quite a ways, maybe 1,360 miles, would make sense, or maybe not. Maybe a lot of that is, maybe the whole Earth is engulfed in this spacecraft. I don't remember what the diameter of the Earth is, or some portion of the Earth is engulfed in that 1,360 miles. So we don't know how far it goes out to Earth, but I think it's safe to say that since T&O said that the space aliens can only circulate in near space, that they cannot circulate in deep space where the next level is, that's the borderline of one of the heavens. Or there might be two borderlines there. So there might be two parts to the heavens. So that the Earth is one of them, that has all the databases in it that are associated with the spirit world and even the hell on earth, potentially the middle of the earth. And then the second one might be above the earth, where the space aliens were allowed to circulate when they were working as watchers. Because they weren't full-fledged members of the next level. So they weren't allowed to go beyond that. And that's why Jesus, when he said that the signs would be in the sun and the moon and the stars, which would include the planets and the comets, are always far away from the Earth, but the asteroids are coming close within the Earth's orbit. But they come from, we know that they come from those places that are beyond what the space aliens have access to. Although humans can possibly create asteroids if they figure out how to shoot an asteroid and blow it up, and they're trying to do that. This is what the Japanese just were hopping on an asteroid, and humans have landed on a comet, and there's an asteroid that's being sighted now that's supposed to come really close to the Earth that doesn't have a tail, so they don't know what it is. Those are all signs of the sun and the moon and the stars, and all the things that have happened on the sun. You know, dozens of them, maybe even hundreds, that I don't know about. We got picture and video of many of them. Because the next level wanted to make sure that all this was available. So that's why, you know, the human kingdom developed. Because they provided that help for the human kingdom to develop. And the space aliens provide some of that help too. Because just of knowing that it's possible. So they go to the leaders of the countries to try to get them to develop their technology so that they can try to get off the planet. Because the rumor has it, according to Doe, that they say that they think, Doe said in USA Today that rumor has it among the space aliens that they're going to be recycled. It says that in the book of Revelation. But Doe didn't relate that to the book of Revelation when he said that I heard. But I'm relating it now because that's a task that those left behind were allowed to do, or provided to do, even though I didn't leave them for that reason. I left them because I flunked. And that's very clear to me. Rio left because, I don't know if I would call it flunked in his case, but he left because he wasn't ready to go all the way. And he had more to overcome than he would overcome compared to the others, because he didn't want to be there to the end, so he really wasn't committed to it, which he revealed in his book. So you can see why he left. It's because he wasn't ready. And that's what he said too. He felt like he had something else to do on the earth, and we always had that exercise. Kind of like, I could count maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe times over the 19 years that I can remember, maybe more, where T and Doe said, mostly when T was in her vehicle, as I remember this, but I think one time at least when Doe was just without T, he did it. T instigated a time where we would spend time separate from everybody else, and we would think about if there was something else in the world we wanted to do. And then we weren't supposed to think about that before that at all. We're supposed to cut it off, treat it like an influence, discard it, and stop it in its tracks even before we had the thought to do that. You know, be able to grow to feel when that influence was tapping on our door. I think what T would call smelling the discarnate or the thought form. It didn't have to be necessarily be a discarnate, just that worked. That worked, and there's a lot of evidence, well, there's some evidence that thought forms T and Doe talked about also are showered on people. And so when people have negative ideas about somebody and they know where they are, which I've got to edit out of this, then they can send their negative thoughts and ideas to me. But I think I got to be ready for that, and because there's going to be an end to my being able to do this, I think. One way or the other, through negativity sent to me. That is the reason why Those vehicles died. T's vehicle died. Those said because of she burned it out. Dealing with the next level negativity, the negativity against her, which was coming from the world, whether it was families or friends of the ones that were in the classroom, or from the media, or from people that read the story and thought that they were evil. Those are all potentially sending that to T, because the Luciferian space alien fallen angels would energize that by saying that's ridiculous, that's a cult, they're evil, she was just a nurse and she was into astrology, so she couldn't be, because astrology is the New Age, and the New Age is all from the devil and all that baloney. The New Age is from the next levels, presence, and the return of all the souls that were students before, and all the vehicles that are the strains of human vehicles that came from those times since the beginning of this current experiment, this current civilization, however long now ago that started, which is before the 6,000 years, or 7,000 years. Maybe it's 7,000 years ago. That would kind of be the indication. Where the history, according to Adam and Eve, was not 7,000 years ago. And we're also talking about, but it didn't have to be, it's like, again, it's like with the heaven, where the heaven starts and where the different levels of heaven start and end. It can be kind of figured out, it seems like, but, an approximate. It's the same thing with the timeline. You can get general ideas that were given, Jesus gave us general ideas of the seasons. And T and Do talked about the solstices and the equinoxes as being particular, and also referring back to the Jewish timeline of the festival times, of primarily in the spring and the fall. And it's interesting that spring is like thought of as the new moon, and fall is thought of as the full moon. And the full moon is associated with the fulfillment of whatever somebody sows during the new moon. So if you sow good seed during the new moon in the spring, it grows up to be harvested in the fall as fruit. And the same thing with minds. That, although taken to a bigger scope, then, the whole planet has its seasons that are ages long. And Tiendo calls them 3 trimesters. And the first trimester was brought to a head during the time of Moses, when Moses left. That was when it was brought to a head. The second trimester was brought to a head when Jesus left. And the third trimester was brought to a head when Tiendo left. But their information is part of that leaving. So it's not like 97 ended the trimester. No, 97 just ended the stages of the trimester. I mean, the teachings that would go into the birthing of the trimester, which was in 2 stages, 2 phases. Like Juno even talked about how the 7th closeness was, phase 1 was their website and the Heaven's Gate book. And they didn't know what phase 2 was going to bring. But at that point, they knew that they were going to be laying down their lives. Because that website, I think, went public around December and Christmas of '96. Or maybe it was the first of the year, approximately, when it went public. I don't know exactly, but I think it was around that time. Because I know when they started working on it in earnest was in 1996, when they left the Earthship and they went to the Phoenix area, or Scottsdale area, because we had lived in Scottsdale and Paradise Valley before. And so I would imagine they went back to that same area. It's the next level, you know, there was a spacecraft, there was a alleged UFO crash in Paradise Valley, at the dump in Paradise Valley. Many years ago, and maybe in the 60s or 70s, I'm not sure. We never went to that dump. Maybe some students were sent there. I think maybe some did, but I don't know. It wasn't a dump anymore. Maybe I think that's what they said, if I remember correctly. But it's a vague memory, so I wouldn't take it to the bank. But I wouldn't say it as a fact. So, is there anything more? Oh yeah, I guess I gotta finish this. So hell is following because well, it's depicted in Revelations chapter 20, I think, where first there's 1,000 years in between death and hell. According to if those years is actually a year, because year can mean different things as well. So I'm not going to try to go through that thoroughly right now. But death is, see, pale horse really isn't the right interpretation for pale, and I'll tell you why. Because it's the word, I know I repeat this every time I give one of these talks, but it's necessary for people, and for me, it helps me do a better job maybe every time, and also for people that I don't know, you know, who's coming on to this that hasn't heard it before. So, for them, and anybody that listens to this video after that. So, the green horse, it says that chloros, it's in the Strong's Concordance, it's 5515, CHLOROS. And for $8 you can get the whole Strong's Concordance with lots of stuff. By just going to the guy that still runs it. I sent the permission to him, and he gave me permission to use it even in my materials. He didn't know what I was going to be talking about, but I wasn't dishonest with him. I didn't tell him everything. I just told him that I was doing a task I believed for the Lord. And I am. I know that. Like we all have. We all potentially have tasks for the Lord right now. By disseminating their information and standing up for T and O. Those are the two biggest parts of the task that are going to be common to all of us. And the degree in which we do that is as we feel led to, as we feel we want to, as we feel we can. And of course that comes with studying the information so that we know what Tiendo we're talking about. And we can talk in, we can talk in the terms that people are going to come up to us and say, that doesn't make sense because this. And then you can say, well, but then there's this, and you might help some people wake up. Not that we're counting, our value isn't based on them waking up. So there's no notches in our crown for getting more people on board. We're just thinking. No value to it at all for us personally. I mean, as a lesson opportunity, it's a value to us because there's certain things that happen, people don't like you and they throw you out of their chat rooms and things like that. And, you can upset people. And sometimes you can upset people by saying too much when they shouldn't really be allowed to be upset, when they really weren't looking for what you had to lay on them. We don't want to lay a trip on anybody. You let them pull it out of you. Sometimes I do it by talking about UFOs first. I'm not even trying to get to Tiendo. Because the task is making it available to those that are seeking. It does, like Tiendo said, you don't want to throw your pearls before swine because if they're not seeking, they potentially could be swine. I'm not saying that people that aren't seeking are all swine. I'm not saying that. In that example, because we can't judge who is the swine and who's not. The next level does that. As far as we're concerned, anybody that even is doing things that are deceitful and evil and even killing other people can still be forgiven from that behavior, according to Jesus. And Tiendo said we could trust what Jesus said in that regard. Because he said the only unforgivable sin was blasphemy against the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit. The holy mind is what that really means. And mind is the truth from the next level, the information, the words the next level said out of their mouths when they were in an incarnate vehicle, like everything Jesus said. So that doesn't mean everything in the book of Revelations can be taken that way. But if we can relate things in the Revelations, it's multiple revelations actually. I was corrected by a Christian who told me that, Revelations wasn't plural. But anyways, so when we can relate to things that Jesus said in the book of Revelations, then, or taught, and Jesus, what he taught was many things that were in the Old Testament. And in the book of Revelations, there's many things that show evidence of originating from the Old Testament, of what Moses said, even though what Moses said, Tiendo said, was distorted and diluted. So we can't trust everything there either. But the things that are more trustworthy are the illustrations, like of the 12 tribes of Israel and the way they set up their temple, where the temple was in the middle, and that's where Moses' quarters were, and then around him, in like an ark around him, not entirely around him, was his group of the closest members of his family, which was Aaron and David and David, was it? But no, Joshua, was Aaron and Joshua and Miriam and his sons and maybe daughters. I don't know if he had daughters. I don't think all of them were there, because he had them before he was given the task to become a representative of Jehovah. So, yeah, and then they had the altar where they, killed the living animals, which was representative of how we have to douse the flame and the life of our human vehicles. Not like that, not like slitting our throats, but by slitting our throats symbolically, by telling the truth to people that want to slit our throats or shoot us, or get rid of us in one way or another. And so all that was done for a reason, and it all relates. And so that's where death actually has a dual meaning. It's death of humanness, it's death of the human vehicles that are giving themselves entirely to the next level, and it's death of the humans that are bringing death upon other humans, and it's death upon humans that brought on by humans taking their own lives, which is sometimes, Tiendo were approved of euthanasia, but they didn't approve of suicide because of not learning the lessons that we have to learn. So if something happens to you that's bad in the world, to you, like let's say you're raped or you're injured badly or whatever, you kill somebody in the war, or you watch your friends being killed in the war and you have PTSD and you want to kill yourself because of that. All those things, if you turn to the next level, you can be forgiven of. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. The bigger things that we do, the bigger lessons, the harder it is. But that doesn't mean that it's harder to get started with that. It's just that, well, I don't know if it's going to be harder, really. So I shouldn't say that. I take that back. For the people that killed somebody or watched other people being killed and stood by and allowed it to happen, didn't say anything or didn't try to get out of it, or faint, That's what probably would have happened to my vehicle. I probably would have fainted. My vehicle faints pretty easily. But, and it's death also by the next level, but also by the lower forces using humans, working through humans to get them to hate each other and fight against each other and kill each other. And then the victims from that, the people that are innocent of that hatred, or partially innocent of that hatred, they are being accelerated as far as the next level, I believe the next level is concerned. In other words, they're being accelerated to whatever they believe. They get whatever they believed at that point that they were accelerated. If they believed that it was justified to go to other countries and kill people, well, they're going to still, as a spirit, they're going to still believe that, and then they're going to support the people that are killing people in other nations. And then when it comes to recycle time, they're going to be recycled into the lake of fire. while the souls that were the Luciferian space aliens, they're not going to be recycled in the lake of fire at the same time. They're going to be recycled into the lake of fire 1,000 years later, or approximately 1,000 years later, when all the plagues are finished. And those plagues are going to be part of, it looks like, what is the lake of fire, because one of those plagues is, well, it's when the 90-pound hail comes, I think is, no, actually, no, there was one, I'm not exactly sure about some of it. You know, there appears to be the 90-pound hail, so that can be like an asteroid. Well, let's say an asteroid comes so close to the Earth that it just explodes when it hits the atmosphere. And it explodes into 90-pound piece chunks. So that's the way it could happen, as opposed to one object going into the sea. Although there is some indication of an object going into the sea. But I don't think that's wormwood. I think wormwood is actually the first older member, I think, during the fourth. Coming closer in their minds. Maybe even a spacecraft that went into the sea. I don't know. Into a literal sea, although it's, the way it's depicted is it's the human sea that's going into. Which would be both. The Earth, it could be both, Earth, sea, and there's been many sightings of spacecrafts going into the sea, even that I heard secondhand. Not through reading, but through somebody that told me a story of his uncle who was in the military. He was a American Indian, and he was an American Indian also in the in what tribe was it? The tribe in the Southwest, one of them. I forgot the name of them now. The Hopis, and he said that he was on board a ship, and he saw, he was among a number of individuals that saw a huge object that didn't look like a meteor, that looked like a spacecraft of some sort, actually go into the sea. Now, it could have been a Luciferian space alien, fallen angel. It could have been, maybe at that point is when the next level sent them into the sea, after allowing them to be out among the near heavens for a while. Because there does seem to be the earliest crashes were in on land were in mid to late 1945, I think, 1946 time period. I think 45 is what I was thinking. Was one in Laredo, Texas, maybe? That was just one individual. And you had the Lubbock Lights. Oh, that's right. So yeah, we've got to visit Lubbock. Anyway, I think so Trump is the green horse, I believe, and that's why everything is green, green this, green that, green politics, green environmental cause, Green Party politics, right? Cause, green marijuana legalization, green talk about space aliens. The Martians were depicted as green. Focus on the green Catholics and their hypocrisy with all the sex abuse and stuff. Green money. How, right now we have a president that was a tycoon, a money tycoon, for kind of the first time, I think. Or, it doesn't matter if it's the first time, but it's during the Four Horses of the Apocalypse time. It's actually the middle beast that Daniel talked about. And I forget where exactly. I have to go remind myself of that so I can get more accurate to that. But I think I'm worn out, and I appreciate that there are 4 individuals that are still watching this, or maybe they left it on and they walked away. I don't know, but I'm also, this gets recorded. That's what's good about YouTube, and it also gets recorded on my end by my device, so I can edit it if I want, and anyway, with that said, keep watching. I think that's the main thing. Keep look up all your problems. There's not a problem that you can have that you can't ask T and Do about. However, to just ask, oh, T and Do, should I buy this mustard or that mustard? Okay, say that if you want to, that's fine, but then study the label, and decide whether you want to buy it based on the label. And, because keep your vehicle as healthy as you can keep it for as long as possible, because your vehicle is your tool to learn lessons through, and to help others learn lessons through. And that's how we can be a humanitarian as well, in terms of helping others. But our focus, first, in my opinion, is best served as trying to offer our service to T and Do, and trusting that they will help us according to the pace that we can handle. They won't give us more than we can handle. T and Do taught that. So if it's happening to us, no matter how hard it looks, we can handle it. But by asking them for the help to handle it, and then even after they give us some help with handling it that we may recognize, through humans, through things we see on the internet, people talking about things, through things that I might say, through some things that your spouse might say, or your son or daughter might say, or children, whatever, it doesn't matter how it comes. We can get help to learn our lessons, like all humans are going through right now. Because T and Do talked about that this is a school. The whole human kingdom is a school, and so the start of the school is when human spirits and souls, however they're intermingled within the spirit population of all the human vehicles that have grown and died, because all those spirits that died are all in the spirit world, supporting or detracting from people, or doing nothing, I guess, lukewarm, right? Just listening to music all the time, whatever floated their boat when they were living the most. And so they're all doing the same thing. So all those are potentially coming through grades in school to become the best human they can be. And the best human would be a humanitarian, would be giving to their church, that might have a religious they're associated with, and that religion could be humanitarianism, or belief in doing everything for humans that we can do. Love your neighbor as yourself. Treat your neighbor as the way you want to be treated. Love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah, which is, and the neighbor was anybody that's in your vicinity. I mean, you can extend it as far as you want to go. There was nothing that said that your neighbor couldn't be somebody from Africa. That's all part of it, potentially. A lot of the movie actors, actresses, give to take on causes in Africa and what's not, but they may be just spirits and souls that are working their way to the top of the human kingdom, and then They also get lessons on, then from grade 6 till 12 is getting out of everything you got into. So if you got into being famous and popular and all that, now you're going to be facing things that reduce that popularity or take away that popularity, take away that fame, take away those riches, take away that that health, take away that I don't know what else there is besides all those things. Our ego. And we can end up, you know, a soul that's in a vehicle that did something terrible and now can't live with themselves, and so they're living on the street with nothing and offer donations, and from one drink to the next, or one shot to the next, or stealing to get their fix, or a sexaholic, or you know, somebody that just has to have sex all the time, doesn't care who, you know, can't avoid it whenever it presents itself, and does nothing to try to avoid. All those individuals can potentially still wake up by hearing the truth, or seeing somebody else, or being inspired by somebody else, or helped by somebody else, to get straight and to stay straight, because we all need help. But asking the next level is the greatest help we can ask for. And the next level isn't the cosmic consciousness. It is. It's not only the cosmic consciousness. Because the cosmic consciousness, for the most part, is that human environment of all those dead spirits. And that includes the ascended masters that ascended to a certain strata of that consciousness. Like those Tian talked about as being in Ekankar, who would, you know, who thought they were going to a certain place in the cosmic consciousness, or the universal mind. The universal mind is actually, according to Tian, two kinds of mind. There's next level mind, and there's lower forces mind of the planet, space alien mind, human equivalent. Space aliens, Tian called the human equivalents. Because their DNA didn't have to, I guess, originate on Earth. Maybe that's why you have people walking around saying, I'm from Venus, I'm from here, I'm from there. Who knows what's possible in that regard? Or you know, who knows if the space alien soul that came from a planet that we don't know the name of, or from Mars, for instance, let's say there was a civilization on Mars, you know, 20 civilizations ago from Earth, before Earth had civilizations on it, or simultaneously even, in stages, then that spirit would be, then if there were souls planted there, then those souls then would retain all that information, as the spirits do also. And the next level, then when those space aliens come, they're bringing back all that information to wherever they're coming to the Earth. And so they're influencing, like Tian said, that they know how the garden grows, the space aliens. They know that giving your life is part of it, or some of them. But the vehicles that they generate using hybrid human cloning and hybrid human sperm and eggs, those vehicles don't necessarily have all the same consciousness as the souls have, because the souls have the direct experience, where then that experience gets passed on. It's just like if you think of humans having genetic characteristics of looking like their parents and thinking like their parents and having skills like their parents. It's the same kind of thing that gets passed on. So the spirit actually has that and that spirit is around those babies when they're born. Those spirits, those literal objects that are dead, are around those babies because they travel in strains of families. That's why the family of human is a strain. And so they're around those families, and they're encouraging those babies to grow, you know, and the grandfathers that died, and the grandmothers that died, and the cousins, and all of them. So so they become, a lot of them become their guardian angels, helping them. And so, you know, so some of those people have miracles occur because one of those spirits saw something that was going to happen, and so they went to the dad or the mom and they said, pay attention to what your daughter's doing. She's in the pool swimming, you know, and she's drowning. And that's actually happened with my sister. And all of a sudden my dad saw that and he jumped in the pool and he saved her. I was in the pool too, but I was oblivious. I was like 10 years old or something like that. And I was oblivious to what my sister was doing. But I saw her underwater, treading water, kind of like underwater. Completely. I don't know if I saw her when my mother or father yelled. Or you know, I don't know if maybe that's when I saw her. Because I know I didn't see her, and I would have hoped I would have thought to try to rescue her. If I was much of a nerd as just letting her tread water there. I mean, I wasn't smoking pot then, so or doing anything else like that. Anyway, so we got a really difficult world to stay conscious of everything that's happening as much as you can, and watch the heavens, you know, help bring the truth to people, you know. When people hear lies on the TV and then they go repeat them to other people, you know, they say these things that are, you know, I mean, when they came out with that thing, 98% of scientists believe that humans are causing global warming, or believe in climate change, and then you find out that what they're talking about is believe that humans are causing climate change, almost exclusively. And it's like, I mean, 98% of scientists all over the world? Well, that's not what the report was about. But you got studies, people studying climate change all over the world. And some of them have a lot different opinions than the ones you hear in the United States the most. And they don't get a voice that much. Unless they write some journal or something and they're published, and then they're published by somebody that's willing to appear to not go along with that crowd. And the way that came about when I studied it was that all the people that had written something about climate change were sent a letter. That was a survey. And the ones that responded to the survey and that said that they believed that humans were causing climate change was the 98%. So it's 98% of the climate change believers that said that. So that's a large percentage of those. But it doesn't talk about how they were studying climate change. It doesn't talk about what degree of climate change that was being caused by humans. And wouldn't that be important? Maybe they think humans are causing 1% of the climate change. And they're not also saying what are the things that humans are doing that might be stimulating climate change. Maybe putting radioactive particles into the atmosphere is also stimulating climate change to some degree. And we're doing that a lot. And those things, those particles, boy, you really better get out of the atmosphere and out of people's water. But they're not doing any effort to do that, are they? But they want to make money with removing the carbon. And even that's a farce, because California is not doing it. They're talking about it, but all they're doing is making money with it because the fossil fuel companies are now paying them carbon tax. Does that reduce how many cars are made? How much oil is being used? No, they don't want to do that because they need that oil to make their jet fuel and rocket fuel. They're not going to stop producing that. And yet, how many people that are in the Democratic Party are buying into that? Look at Bernie Sanders. Even he's bought into it. Which is part of the green thing. Bernie Sanders is from Vermont, the Green Mountain State. Also, the Ceres lights on the state house of the Vermont State House in Montpelier. There's a green what's called here death. No, not death. Pale. The pale horse in the book of Revelations. Pale horse in the book of Revelations, right here. Says that it's chloros. I started with this. Chloros, with C-H-L-O-R-O-S. When I researched that, actually through some software that gave me a little more information beyond Strong's Concordance, that's in, I think, hbible.com. It talked about this being associated, this word, chloros, being associated with the Ceres, the Roman goddess, no wait, the Greek goddess Ceres. No, the Greek goddess Demeter, Demeter. And that Ceres is the Greek goddess, no, is the Roman goddess. I'm sorry, I'm getting tired, I guess, so my thoughts are wandering. But so where that's green is that like the Roman goddess Ceres and the Demeter goddess Demeter, so geez, I'm really getting confused now, is the god of the harvest. Is the god of the harvest, and the harvest is green, like Jesus talked about how the harvest was green and the harvest was ripe. You know, when the harvest is ripe, it's green. It's all the leaves are are there fully, and they're producing fruit potentially from that harvest. I mean, the fruit is twofold. The plant itself is fruit, and but it's the plant itself that gives rise to the fruit of the apple or the flower, the rose, the greatest rose. Doe's favorite song was from the Christmas carols. Maybe favorite song, well, was I think he said because it was T's favorite song, was Lo How a Rose. Lo How a Rose upspringing, tender root. We used to sing that sometimes, and they sang it in the group after I left. So, and I can't mention series, or series like the cereal, that's where it comes from, I believe, with the Lights on series, on Dwarf Planet series, that happened at the same time as that Pluto is shown to be an object with an atmosphere and 4 rectangular black, like keys of the piano keys, which T-taught that the lesson steps were the piano roll, she said, was the lesson steps of the song that was the lessons like Old MacDonald's song she compared it to. Old MacDonald's Had a Farm song, where you kept on adding the lessons with each note of the piano roll, so that you would keep on playing the whole piano song every time you. So Old MacDonald had a cow, E-I-E-I-O, another cow had a blah blah blah, a moo moo here, moo moo there, and then when Old MacDonald had a cow, no, had a chicken, and then chicken cluck 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 cluck, and then Old MacDonald had a cow, and said to repeat the cow again. That's about all I got. But there's a lot more to say about series and this verse in Scripture. And I'm probably going to go through this almost every time I do a live service. So you can tell me in the, if you want to hear something new, but I wish I could, I got to keep on covering it. But maybe the next one I'll just try to cover the second part of it. And maybe try to make some headway on going to the next seal. Which I did. I did some of this, but I guess there's more things I've learned since I wrote my book. So they jump out at me, and so I get the benefit of taking from where I'm leaving off. All right. Good night before I fall asleep on the screen here. Good night.